Hello everyone, I am Jonathan, also known as the Medieval Genie, and today we're going to have a look at the Ridley Scott film, which was The Last Duel, which is a strange name when there were plenty of duels after it, but anyway. Now Matt Easton and others have already ridiculed the ridiculous helmets and things, and the fact that the whole film bombed, and Ridley Scott sort of blaming millennials and all this kind of stuff. But I thought, I haven't yet had a chance to, for myself, look at the fight scenes in there. And I've not actually watched the film, and it perhaps in a way helps with the sort of the blind look, because instead of maybe, you know, having a bias, like, for example, I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so I might look at a fight scene and give it a more favourable review because of the fact that I like the rest of the film, you know, that sort of thing. Whereas here, I don't really have any opinion either way. I just will have a look, and as a historical European martial artist, have a few thoughts and opinions about how it went. So let's have a look, shall we? Right, here we go. First 4 minutes opening scene. Let's have a look. Skip adverts.
Or to carry a sword or dagger, unless he be one who has the express permission of our Lord the King. Each man is to fight on horseback and on foot, armed in a manner that pleases him with any weapon or device of attack.
Any weapon or device.
Or devices of equal design, or maybe charms, or spells, or any other thing that is forbidden by God and Holy Church to all Christians.
Surprising.
Neither combatants shall carry on to the field of battle any arms that have been forged with spells, charms, enchantments, or any other evil art. And so shall the malefactor be punished.
Curious that they're sort of going on about spells, enchantments and things like that, when really, you know, this sort of circumstance, if they're saying any weapons or devices that, you know, as a manner befitting to the fight, then you could end up with some very uneven duels. For example, I'm wielding an arming sword. This sort of thing is good in one hand, but you could bring up a two-handed sword against that and you have an advantage, or you could be what might traditionally be referred to as more like a cowardly sort of way and use a spear against a sword, which in that case then again makes for an unfair advantage to someone if they were unarmoured, or since they look like they are right now gearing up for combat, fair enough, then, and yeah, it looks like he's got a sword there. You know, guy goes up against you with a Vulg, Bardish, Partisan spear. That gives an advantage. If there's enough armour that you can't kind of jab at people and, you know, cut and thrust, and you've got to get past the sort of the chinks in the armour and the gaps, you know, like in the visor and the armpits and all those sorts of things, you could then just switch to maybe something like a poleaxe or a mace in sort of a staff form, or something like that. Or I'd be tempted to give a crossbow a shot, literally. You know, oh, I've got one here that I got from Todd's stuff. Yes, in fact, I should probably show one of these. Let's have the camera full screen. Now, in terms of penetrating armour, it would be a bit of a questionable thing. This one is cocked with a goat's foot lever. I'm just trying to see if I can find it in this room, because I haven't used this crossbow in a while. But the design of it means that I could load it. I mean, yes, it's a bit slow on a battlefield and all of that, but I could load it, since the duel doesn't seem to have any rules against it. I could load a windlass powered crossbow, so I could have one on the floor, spend a good minute or so. You've got a winch and pulley, getting a crane and winch, you know, very powerful, over 1,000-pound draw weight, and get the bolt on there, and then I start the duel with an exceptionally powerful crossbow that's frankly would end up feeling like a miniature handheld ballista, blast the guy almost point blank in the face, and then draw, you know, a mace or whatever other item. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed victory, but just, you know, it wouldn't make for a very exciting duel. And they seem to have gathered a whole crowd, I noticed, in the scene, you know, before they showed the knights gearing up. Just saying, you know, yeah, you should probably have more rules than that. That's why they tended to have, if there were matches like judicial duels, they tended to make sure there were very strict rules about what people could use. And there were techniques and stuff to give an advantage. But they usually, if it was trial by combat, there would be an agreed set of weapons and, you know, ways that the fights will go beforehand to stop people from having very uneven fights, because it's kind of exciting if you're having kind of like, you know, a gritty Game of Thrones style kind of fight scene where two people have wildly different weapons. You've got about 60 seconds worth of something cool, but in reality that would make for a fight that's over in a matter of seconds. Some person's, you know, walked up with a one-handed sword, the other guy walks up with a crossbow, choosh, okay, he's done. I mean, yes, I mean, I could have over 1,000 pounds of force into this, but obviously it's still just an ordinary, this sort of trigger system. So what I'd have to do is point it gently in a direction, a little touch, and this thing will discharge faster than Jimmy Savile at his 7th birthday party, you know? Let's continue. Okay, it looks like a coat of plates. Looks about right for the time period. Interesting thing, some people would wear a full shirt of chainmail underneath a breastplate, you know, a cuirass type of thing. Some people would only wear it in bits like what are called the voiders, which were in sort of armpit areas and bits that were exposed. And that was, you know, that's not something to do with historical accuracy. That's just some people preferred to have the full shirt for the protection, just in case. Some people prefer to have just bits like voiders and bits so it'd be a bit lighter. I don't know which I prefer. Not done armoured combat yet. Okay, so they're starting with mounted combat. There's the helmet. I mean, do I really need to mention why this is dumb? You've got half the face exposed. Same with that guy, it's... Guy could die. That amount of horsepower, pardon the pun, just pile-driven behind, you know, that lance point. Fight could be over. Spike through the brain in one hit. Fight, you know, they've all got all this setup for several hours. Is this turned into a trailer? Yes, it is. It's a trailer. So in that case, I will... Yep, I'm gonna go into a different actual fight scene. Apparently there's one at the end. Let's have a look, shall we? Right, here we go. This time there'll be an actual... This will be the full fight scene. So similar as mentioned before, yep, they're setting up with their full armour. They seem to have... I suppose this is a bit of a Hollywood upgrade. They will at least wear helmets. Some of these films, you know how it is. Ah, beautiful face.
Let it be in God's hands.
So this is a kind of a half and half. I want a helmet, but I want to show the actor's face. They're not even having time to prepare for their round. It's also chaotic. What's to stop the guy from turning around and like going, oh, you know what? Screw it. We're not having rounds with Lances, Mason. Of course, there are no rules in warfare, but if you're doing a duel like this, you want to keep the audience entertained and not kill the attendees. Also not kill the horses. They're pretty expensive. It's like replacing a sports car. Jeez. He's got an axe, just smash his knees in. Does axe? Yeah, if he's got a shield, you just... Oh! Okay, I'll hit your legs. Was that a whip? Swords do occasionally break. I've actually seen it happen. Usually the tip comes off. Instead of punching him, use the pommel. But yeah... Rondel dagger. Nasty. Now here's a note. The guy with the sword in red, I don't know why he's getting so close, because the other guy has a dagger. You can turn the sword upside down and use the quillons or the pommel, these sorts of areas, to smash someone's face in with. But if the other guy's got a dagger, I don't want to get anywhere near him. Obviously, close range, you know, the absolute point blank range, you can grapple with people like it's MMA type of stuff. You could do half swording, which is like this. I'm kind of taking the sword close up, wielding it almost like a quarterstaff, but I can kind of use the point, smash the face with the pommel all that again, and keep grappling. There are lots of techniques like that, but again, the guy has a dagger, so that's kind of a range where he can just shank you. You know, not in the armour itself, but in all the gaps and all that. I wouldn't really want to risk it, so if you, the longer red can keep blue at a distance, the better. So I don't know why he's giving up the advantage and charging in. I don't know why there seem to be edits in this. Now there we are, Quill and Strike! Haha! Wrestling. Oh, and he's doubling up. That is a Fiore technique. Someone's, well, in general, add the extra hand for... Yeah, that, basically.
Proving your cause to be truthful and just, you have fought with strength and...
A lot of cut edits. Sorry, I think this clip on YouTube's been shortened in parts. Well, that seems to be the duel over. So yeah, I don't know. I think there were parts missing because of the way this person's cut parts out. Maybe to avoid getting a copyright strike. That shit happens a lot on YouTube, thanks. Might even happen to me. But yes, in terms of how this sort of thing can go. So I'm talking about half swording. Of course I can use a sword as you'd normally expect, like you'd see in movies, TV, video games, type of stuff. I've got the sword out like this. Half swording, grab the blade part way up, and I can manipulate it, and I can, you know, I could hook with the quillons like the guy did. He went boosh. I can use the pommel to strike, and I can obviously manipulate the point more finely. And you might think, oh, grab a sharp sword because you'll cut yourself. Haha. Ow. Let's grab this one. This is a sword I forged previously. It's sharp. Let's have a test example item. This is a lid from a yogurt pot. It cuts cleanly. So, if I were to chop towards my hand, I'm going to wound myself. If I was to slice, I wound myself. However, I have gripped the blade. And tightly. And you can see that I'm not cheating. I'm not using my other hand to suspend it. So, I take the blade away. You can see a mark where the edge is pushed in. You can see a very clear geometric set of lines. But that is all. I have not cut myself by half swording, so bear that in mind. Of course, in an actual fight where all of this stuff is happening, yes, you know, some movement could happen and a bit of cut, but frankly, compared to severely wounding or dying, it's, you know, a small expense to pay compared to what your opponent has to receive. So, yeah, that sort of thing works if you get really close. But if there's a guy with a knife, you want to keep them back here. You know, I don't really want them to get close. I want to threaten them, and I want to maybe do a bit of quick swish, stab, all of this, whatever the hell you like. But threaten them, keep them at a distance. The guy won in the end because he was doing some grappling. When I say doubling up, that is a Fiore trick. So let me grab a knife or dagger. I've got a drawer full of them. So here's one I made. So with this knife, I could go, you know, this sort of grip, which is quite classic. Modern TV, video games, and the rest tend to depict what I call a sort of a chav stab, which is my overhand grip. People doing kind of swishing in the movies. In real life, if you see people, if they're fighting, they're doing kind of this type of stuff. They're shanking sort of from underneath upwards, kind of, you know, thrust up or thrust forwards with the knife. But what we see in the manuscripts and depicted in treatises and things like that, historically, is a lot more of a kind of a horror movie type of stab. This type of thing, overhand, thrusting downwards to plunge into people, and that's what we saw in the actual movie clip. So there's a guy kind of trying to do this with his dagger, which is fair enough. Wants to get maybe around here in the gap in the armor, maybe through here in the eye socket. I mean, they've got like half the face missing on the helmet, so really anywhere like here is a valid target instead of like having to go for the mouth, neck, eyes. Just all of this is fine. But you've got other areas like under the armpit, inside the elbow, cuff of the gauntlet, palm of the hand, areas like that to target, and you've got an extra hand, so it does become a bit like what you might see in some modern martial arts, like your kind of karambit stuff. And you can even, same as with karambit, although you don't have a hook to kind of go under and use the cutting edge to manipulate people, you can still use the blade like a bar. So I could, for example, catch a person's hand that's coming in and then do joint locks like you might see in grappling based martial arts. Or I could use the knife. I could, for example, catch someone's hand, and where they might slip past, with the blade in the way, I can kind of hook more efficiently so someone could have a sword, you know, and I could hook them, push and go in. There are lots of options, but having the knife means that obviously you've got grappling range. So the sort of distance I am from the camera now, if I take the sword, I can hit it. In fact, I'm actually a little bit close. I'm actually sort of pushing my body against my bed here in my room. Whereas with the knife, I've got to really close in, so it's not a viable option. So yeah, that was a bit of a weird moment. But yes, that's that with... I suppose there isn't quite so much of a fight scene to comment on, which is just... that's a bit of an irony. The whole film is called The Last Duel, but that scene was... there wasn't quite so much action to it. I'm not seeing sort of personalities. And a good fight scene shows kind of the characters and the way they've developed and the way that they behave in the duel itself. Someone might, for example, do something more overcommitted because they're angry. So if someone's really confident, calm and confident, they go, haha, okay, here we are, fencing, haha, whoosh, whoosh, swish about. Whereas someone who's angry or being violent, he'll sort of go, really put that effort and overcommitment in there. But I'm just seeing that same type of thing from both of them, and I'm not seeing one of them who's maybe more cautious, or one of them who's a bit more of a gambler. You know, they're both doing the same kind of stuff to each other. I'm not seeing any distinct, again, personality between them. You could, for example, have someone who, if you get someone more relaxed, they might stay in perhaps low guards. They'll say, okay, here we are, I'm sat here, or maybe a kind of relaxed position, but they're sort of still wary and still analysing their opponent. Aha! Now we're going and dueling. Instead, they're just chimp movements. All of this. So again, I obviously haven't watched the film to see the characters, but whatever their personalities are supposed to be, you're not seeing any of that. And every time I do fights with people, obviously I haven't had many real fights in earnest, but even, you know, with those, or in what I'm used to, the sparring and the sort of casual, friendly dueling, you've got people's personalities tend to come through. If someone's quite frustrated or they're angry because of what's been going on in the work week, you can actually see it in the way they fight. The way that a person fights actually changes based on how they're currently feeling, but also their general attitude. If they're quite a cautious person, you'll see that reflected in the way they try to ward blows and counter, compared to people who kind of are more easygoing, don't care, you know, live fast, die young types who will kind of attack into your attack, and then you both get hit more, and, you know, bits and details like that, which you see in fights. And you can have lots of really interesting storytelling where you can, instead of saying this person behaves like this, you can actually follow the golden rule of storytelling. You show, don't tell. You actually can demonstrate the way that a character is, maybe the way they've grown since previously, the ways in which events have changed them. You know, maybe someone has taken a darker turn. Maybe someone, you know, if let's say someone was feeling more suicidal because they're so angry, they've had so much loss, so then they're doing that sort of overcommitted stuff, and they're not really worrying about the wounds that they're receiving in the meantime, whereas previously they were kind of fencing with people and trying to be really cautious. Or for example, you could have someone showing their level of violence in what they do with their sort of attacks. Like, for example, you have a person like me who's been way too strongly influenced by a Judeo-Christian upbringing, so they do something more like a hand carve. They cut and cause a wound and try to sort of see what's happening from there, whereas someone who is really violent will try to go in for the absolute, you know, the absolute fight finishing, stab to the guts, cut the head off type of stuff. You know, even if they're a bit more cautious and they're a bit more dainty of it, they'll want to go for more of that kind of gruesome wounding, whereas others might be a bit more tentative, and instead of hitting more firmly and violently, they tend to do more of a technical fight. They do, you know, it's almost like tagging the opponent. They'll do a minimalistic sort of wounding action, get out of there safely. So this sort of thing shows, and even with people that I've never met before, I can see sort of who they are from the way they fight. But in this movie, I'm just seeing two people clunkily lumping at each other. I'm seeing, you know, a sort of a degree of violence. Obviously they're angry, they want to kill each other, but I'm not seeing anything else beyond that. Is one of them perhaps more trying to be wise and cautious? Is one of them someone who takes risks, or are they more risk averse? Is there someone who, you know, are there people who actually feel confident in themselves and might want to get up close to grapple? Or are they more nervous and they might try kind of distance keeping, kind of, you know, try a few things, half committing because they're sort of, they want to do the wounding, but they kind of, you know, all of this stuff. It can be reflected in the fighting, but I'm not seeing any of it, frankly. And, you know, if a person's more kind of gritty and then they're not sticking to, they don't follow rules, they're just doing what works, whereas some might be more doing, okay, I'll do this here and then getcha type of stuff, you know, calculating, methodical, sort of a tactical type of person. There are many different ways. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but it's not showing in this, which is a shame really, because fight scenes, I think, can really be great forms of storytelling, and to not use it effectively is kind of wasting the audience's time. Every scene should serve a purpose, and fight scenes included. It shouldn't just be A experiences B, A wins, B loses, we move on. The scene itself should help tell the story and develop the plot and the characters with what happens in the fight scene as well as what happens outside of it, before and after, you know? But that's my take. Maybe that's why Ridley Scott wasn't doing so well, because if that's how the rest of the movie goes, it probably is just a load of A and B are here, they're these characters, stuff happens, next scene, story beat, A, B, C, they're in a room, they talk, stuff happens, next scene. Very formulaic. It's not the way to do it. So yes, if you want me to review any fight scenes, I'd be more than happy to. Just comment below any examples and I will look into them. See you in the next video.